Hey yo, what up, it's your boy. Now look, I think it's pretty rare in this day and age to come across somebody who A, hasn't had any Japanese food, B, doesn't really like Japanese food, or C, doesn't want to explore the vastness of Japanese food, because it's full of fantastic dishes. But as much as people like to believe that everything that Japan has to offer food-wise is at an amazing level, much like every other country's cuisine, that's not always the case. So today I figured it might be a little bit fun to grab just a tiny little sliver, the real tippity tip of the iceberg of Japanese foods, and rank them on a tier list according to my opinions. But hey, while we're on the topic of Japanese food this video, let me tell you about an absolute S tier ranked Japanese food, or more specifically, Japanese box. That's right, I'm talking about the sponsor of today's video, the good folks over at Boxu. Boxu, for those of you who don't know, is the monthly Japanese snack box that delivers premium, authentic Japanese snacks straight from Japan to your door. And each and every month they have a theme, and all of the snacks in that box fit that particular theme. Right now we are in the month of January. A happy new year to each and every one of you, my boys. And it seems that Boxu as well seems to be in the festive mood, because the monthly theme for the January 2023 Boxu is the Shinshun New Year box. Shinshun, for those of you who don't know, means the new year in Japanese. And at the beginning of the year, Japan definitely has some very traditional and festive foods that we eat. And it seems that the snacks that Boxu has packed into this month definitely follows that trend. For example, I'm really glad that they actually managed to throw in some Yokohama buttercream sandwich biscuits. These are absolutely bomb, my boys. Oh my god, I'm gonna eat one right now. They got these like cute little pictures of Yokohama on the biscuit as well. Smells buttery. Tastes creamy. And don't worry, because Boxu is playing 5D chess when it comes to enjoying your snacks to the fullest. They always put in a classic tea pairing to go with the snacks. For this month, it is a genmaicha that has a little bit of matcha in it as well. A perfect combination. All of this and a whole lot more included in this month's Boxu and every single Boxu. So if you're wondering, hey Joey, I want to experience the brand new year like a Nihonjin, but I can't travel to Japan, then don't worry. All you have to do is click the link down in the description below, and just for you boys, a brand new yearly gift from me to you. If you use the coupon code Joey at checkout, you can save $15 off your first Boxu order, my boys. So a happy new year from me and Boxu, and thank you to Boxu for sponsoring this video. Look, you guys should know how this works by now. Here's a tier list. I have 20 Japanese dishes, foods that I took from a collection of different articles that we're talking about, like the best Japanese foods to try when you visit Japan. So I went, oh really? What's your sauce? Because it sounds like you made it the fuck up. So let's go through one by one and give you my quick little thoughts and opinions and see where they rank on this tier list. Let's go! First and foremost, let's start off with probably the most quintessential Japanese food. And no, it's not sushi. In fact, it is edamame. Now, for those of you who don't know, edamame are these green beans. I don't exactly remember what they were called in English necessarily, but they're these beans, sometimes seasoned, like in this picture, sometimes just straight up boiled. And most of the time, you will grab these every time you go to an izakaya. Every time you go out and drink or eat with a bunch of friends, these will either come out just complimentary at the restaurant, or it's usually the first thing someone orders, especially if you go with a bunch of people who have been to izakayas in the past. Now, look, I'm not going to be a contrarian right off the bat and say, no, edamame is fucking overrated, because, I mean, there's a reason why it's a staple in the Japanese izakaya world. And my family is from Sendai, and in the Miyagi prefecture, we actually take this edamame, mash it up into a paste, add some sugar, and turn it into a thing called zunda, which I personally prefer over edamame, but that's just because I grew up with it. I think in general, though, as just a piece of just Japanese street food, edamame is pretty goddamn good. Now, is it like the most mind-bending thing in the world? Not necessarily. So I'm happy to put it up in like a B tier. I think that's a solid place. Sometimes the edamame you get it as a little bit weak and doesn't have a lot of flavor, but when you get good edamame, that shit slaps, dog. All right, next up, we are going to take a nosedive straight into the controversial takes with this one right here. This is fugu, or pufferfish. Pretty infamous now that, yes, Japan is a country that eats pufferfish. And now, for those of you who have just happened to stumble upon this video not knowing anything about Japanese food, you're probably thinking, wait, isn't pufferfish poisonous? Yes, it is in fact poisonous. That's why pufferfish chefs take like literal decades to master the craft on being able to properly cut and prepare this poisonous fish so that it is safe for consumption. And even then, I think, according to recent statistics, still, I think 3 to 5 people in Japan die every year from undertrained professionals. Now, look, I am a lover of sashimi, or raw fish. I freaking love sashimi. I could eat it every day if I wanted to. And I've had fugu a couple of times in the past, which is a great thing because fugu, for the most part, is quite expensive. And I can tell you right now, just straight up, it ain't worth the hype. To be honest, fugu, out of every sashimi that's available in Japan, even if you happen to get it like fresh, it's one of the most tasteless pieces of raw fish that you could possibly have in the sea, literal sea of beautiful sashimi you could be eating. Not to mention that it's usually cut really, really thin because the texture is quite rubbery, and also it's way more expensive than any other type of raw fish you could be getting. So to be honest with you guys, I'm gonna save you guys the trouble. I'm actually gonna put fugu down into an F tier. I think it is extremely fucking overrated rather, and just really not worth the money. Like, spend that money to get something that actually tastes good. Don't bother with fugu. Like, it's not worth putting your life on the line for. All right, next up is a staple of Japanese junk food, and that is gyudon, or beef bowls as they call them. Now there is a top 3 beef bowl chains here in Japan, Yoshinoya, Sukiya, and Matsuya. And you could ask anyone who lives in Japan what is the best one, and it's like asking like a political debate in the US. It gets that heated. And look, gyudon for the most part is freaking great. I mean, a bunch of cooked beef on a bed of rice. Like, why would you not like that unless you're a vegetarian? I freaking love it. I used to eat it like almost every day when I was in college and when I was interning in Japan. It is usually prepared very, very cheap, and there are also lots of different like versions of gyudon that you could eat, like with lots of different toppings and stuff like that. My personal favorite, for those of you who live in Japan, is the Takana Mentai Mayo gyudon that you can get at Sukiya. That is clearly the best one, and I will not accept any arguments over it. You're just wrong. Overall though, gyudon, pretty freaking hype. I really enjoy it. I still eat it to this day whenever I get the craving for it. I'm gonna throw it up in the A tier. For the most part, it's a really solid Japanese food, and it is a lot healthier than, say, a trip to McDonald's. All right, let's keep the train of beef going with this next one. This is gyudan, or ox tongue. Now, for some people watching this, some nationalities who are not used to eating this part of the cow, you're probably thinking to yourself, dog, are Japanese people like tongue kissing with dead cows? The answer is yes, and that is because it is absolutely freaking delicious. Now look, there are specific places that you can get like specialties in gyudan. For example, again, as I was mentioning earlier in the edamame thing, if you go up to the Miyagi prefecture in Sendai, they specialize in gyudan, and it's absolutely godlike. But even if you don't necessarily eat the specialties, it is just a really solid piece of cooked meat, and you know, it's light. You can put some lemon on that boy, you can put some salt on that boy. There's different ways that you can eat it. I think out of any kind of like cooked meat, it's probably my favorite to eat. You know, once you've had like the really good stuff as well, it's really freaking solid. Now there are some places where it's a little bit whack that I've had before, so just for that I'm gonna put it into the B tier, because you know, there are sometimes kind of whack, very chewy pieces of gyudan, like any other piece of meat really. So you know, just based on that discrepancy, I'll throw it in the B tier. All right, next up is karage, or deep fried chicken. Now, look, I mean, this is god tier, but again, there are some times where it's like a little bit too wet or a little bit too oily or not like crispy. Like the crispy types of karage are just chef's kiss. But sometimes if you go to like a cheap izakaya, you can get some real wet and sloppy karage. But I think for the most part, you know, karage is pretty goddamn good. It's hard to complain unless you're a vegetarian. I'm gonna throw that up in the A tier. All right, next up is katsudon, which is basically deep fried pork cutlets with some egg and onion on a bed of rice. I'm not even going to argue with anybody. This is some S tier material. This is some of the best Japanese food that you could be eating. Again, unless you are a vegetarian, please, if you are going to Japan for the first time, do yourself a solid and go to a really freaking good katsudon place, because you will not be disappointed. It is fucking godlike. I'm salivating just thinking about it. All right, next up is we're going back to the izakaya styled food. This is kushikatsu or deep fried skewers. Now, this is kind of difficult to put on a tier list because there are so many types of kushikatsu. Like, this is saying, like, you know, this is the equivalent of saying, like, hamburgers. Like, there are so many different types of burgers, right? So it's kind of in the same vein. But basically, for the most part, kushikatsu involves, you know, maybe pieces of chicken or pork or beef, and then with some vegetables, you know, sometimes deep fried egg, deep fried cheeses, stuff like that. Really, anything that can be deep fried and put on a skewer is called kushikatsu. I've had some really fucking weird types of kushikatsu. I've had some absolutely godlike kushikatsu. I've had some whack-ass kushikatsu. It really is just kind of all over the place. So I think just putting all of that together, I'll probably throw it up in a C tier. I'm also getting to the stage now where I'm having trouble eating deep fried foods. I don't know if that's age or just the fact that I've kushikatsu'd myself the fuck out. But either way, sometimes it's really godlike. Sometimes it's pretty good. I think overall, though, it's just possible. All right, this is another one that has lots of different varieties. This is nabe or hot pot. I'm going to rate this a little bit higher than the kushage, purely just because there are more types of nabe I personally enjoy more than kushage. I'm actually going to throw it up in the A tier because there are certain types of nabe, especially things like sukiyaki, and for me personally motsunabe, that I just absolutely fucking love. Chanko nabe as well, which is the stuff that sumo wrestlers eat, is godlike and is absolutely delicious. Perfect for this time of like year, the winter season, to like warm you up as well. So if you're going to come to Japan during the winter seasons, do yourself a favor, go to a good nabe place, warm yourself up, and realize that comfort food exists outside of your own home too. All right, next up is something that is rather controversial. This is natto, or fermented soybeans. Now, for those who have come to Japan and have tried out all sorts of different Japanese food, this is most likely something that you think is disgusting. And I totally get that. Now, for those of you who have never tried it, natto, fermented soybeans, is, as the name suggests, you take a bunch of soybeans, you put it on the ground for a while, you let it ferment, basically rot, and then when you pull it back out of the ground, it turns into this kind of very soy-based, sticky types of beans. Now, a lot of people can't handle the smell, and a lot of people can't handle the sticky and slimy texture. Now, for someone like me, who grew up with this shit, natto is god tier. So I'm actually going to throw it up in an A tier. Now, look, you guys can complain and being like, well, that's not fair because you grew up eating this shit. Well, this is my tier list, motherfucker. If you have an opinion, put it down in the comments. I'd love to hear it. But look, I totally get people who don't like natto because I have Japanese friends who were born and raised in Japan and are 100% Japanese who don't like natto either. So this is definitely a food that really picks you more than you picking it. So you're not missing out on like too much if you don't eat natto, to be honest, because Japan has figured out a billion different ways to use soybeans. So look, this is just one other type of weirder type of soybean dish. If you don't like it, that's fine. More for me, dog. All right, next up is something a little more savory, something a little more delicious for a lot of people. This is okonomiyaki or savory pancake. I don't care what anyone says, dude. This is some S tier shit right here. Like, I fucking love okonomiyaki. There are so many different ways you can prepare it. Usually it involves, you know, cabbage, a little bit of pork at the bottom, maybe some bean sprouts if you live in Hiroshima area, because there is the Hiroshima type of okonomiyaki and then there's the Osaka type of okonomiyaki. I kind of like both. I don't really have a preference personally in which one is better, but some people get very defensive about which one is better. Either way, you know, there are lots of different variations of this. You can add seafood to it. I personally really like the ones where you mix kimchi into it. That shit is godlike. It's fucking awesome. And I think this is one of those foods that just gets better and better and better the less you have it. I feel like if you ate okonomiyaki like every week, it would kind of start to lose its like value and like I guess a special factor to me. Like for me, okonomiyaki is something I eat maybe like 2 or 3 times a year, but the 2 or 3 times a year I eat this, God, I come home fucking satisfied. A glass of cold beer goes so well with this, you have no idea, boys. All right, next up is something that I actually didn't realize is a Japanese dish. I thought this was just something that the Japanese incorporated, and it's omurice. Now, first of all, excuse me for the picture I decided to choose. Just I was going through the websites again, as I said earlier, and one of the websites just happened to use one of the most unattractive pictures of omurice I've ever seen in my goddamn life. Trust me, most omurice look a lot better than whatever the fuck this is, but just bear with me for the sake of this video. Now, omelette, you know, it's kind of like an omelet, but it has rice on the inside, usually rice mixed with ketchup. It's like a staple, like kids food, but you know, I've had some really, really fancy, and like even the standard omelette, even as an adult, shit slaps. Like it's fucking delicious. I'd say, you know, putting the fact that like kids can enjoy it as well as adults can enjoy it, I'm willing to throw up into the A tier. Like this is a really solid Japanese dish, in my opinion, that I think anyone can enjoy. All right, here we go. Next one right here is another staple, the jelly-filled donut. For the rest of you who are normal, this is onigiri. These are rice balls. I'd say probably the most staple of staple standard Japanese foods. Like this thing has existed for literal centuries and centuries and centuries. Like ever since the beginning of the Japanese like civilization, this thing has existed. And look, you know, I love me an onigiri. You know, it's probably the one thing that a lot of people who visit Japan for the first time experience the wow factor of by just going into a convenience store, grabbing yourself an onigiri of whatever flavor, chowing down on it, realizing that you just had the most delicious meal for like 120 yen or something. It's great, but I feel after a while, you know, it's not necessarily something you seek out. It's just something that just happens to be there. You know, it's kind of like a hot dog in the US, you know. It's like yeah, hot dogs are great, but after a while I'm just kind of like, yeah, I'm not like necessarily craving for a hot dog. If it's there, I'll eat it, but I'm not like, you know, dying from hunger to eat a hot dog every day. I don't know, maybe that's just me with hot dogs. I'm sure there are other hot dog fiends out there in the world, but either way, for me, onigiri is, I think, kind of lost, not necessarily lost its value, but I think there are a lot of places that don't really do onigiri all that great, especially if you compare it to like the freshly made onigiri. You know, obviously those are always going to be a lot better. There are so many different like things you can put inside of an onigiri where that completely changes everything as well. So I think, you know, kind of same with the kushiyage. I'm going to throw it into the C tier. I think, you know, taking everything into consideration, it balances out. Sometimes it's fucking whack. Sometimes it's absolutely delicious. All right, next up is probably, again, a staple of Japanese food, ramen. Now, I'm going to maybe piss off a couple of people, but I'm actually going to throw ramen into a C tier. And here's the reason why. For one, tsukemen is better. Just there's not even an argument. Tsukemen is better. Two, there are so many ramen places, and look, I've had ramen all over Japan, all over the world even. And one thing I can say for certain is that the majority of the times I've had ramen in Japan, it's been like a 5 out of 10 experience. And that's just because the competition is so great, especially in Japan. Like it's one, like the food industry is already competitive here in Japan, but the ramen industry in Japan is ultra competitive. It is so hard to stand out when it comes to ramen in Japan. And I think maybe I just got unlucky and I haven't gone to like all the best ramen places ever. I mean, I've had some absolutely amazing ramen, don't get me wrong, but I think the most well-known ramen in Japan, according to foreigners, is always the most 5 out of 10 shit. I'm talking to you, Ichiran lovers. Ichiran, for example, is the most fucking basic ass, like 5 out of 10 ramen, and it's literally just a tourist trap. Don't bother going to an Ichiran. It's not that great in my opinion. If you want some actual S tier ramen, find a ramen place that looks like it's about to crumble down. The crappier it looks on the outside and the smaller it looks on the outside, the better the ramen, because they're not trying to fool you with all of these flashy lights to get into their store. They are that confident about their flavor and about their like style, their distinct style, that usually those kinds of places are usually the ones where I've had some of the best ramen experiences personally. So I think, again, putting all that into perspective, ramen is just a C for me. There are better noodles out there in my opinion. All right, next up we have shogayaki, or ginger pork. Now, this one is a little lesser known, I feel, to people visiting Japan from overseas, and is one that I think a lot of people overlook. But if you like your ginger and you like your pork, then you don't want to miss out on this. Ginger pork is fucking godlike. Seriously, like it's freaking amazing. I love it. Again, not necessarily something I'm like craving for, but it's fucking solid. So I'm willing to throw it up into a B tier. Shogayaki is great, and also is relatively healthy for you in the meat dish category, especially in Japan. All right, next up is a different type of noodle. This is soba. This is buckwheat noodle. For one, I personally prefer it over ramen because it is A, lighter, B, it is way healthier for you, and C, you can have it warm or cold, something that you can't do with ramen, so there's more versatility. So I think, if you're a little bit bored of ramen, I would say go for soba. I'm going to throw it up in the B tier, by the way. But yeah, I think if you want to try something a little bit different when it comes to the noodle world in Japan, try out some soba. I mean, soba's freaking great. Like, you can't go wrong with it. It's absolutely delicious, absolutely divine. It's amazing in the summer, amazing in the winter. You have some with a little bit of duck meat inside of it. Whew, my boy. All right, next up is probably another staple for a lot of people. This is tempura, or deep fried vegetables and meats. Now, again, this is going to be another thing that I think people are going to hate me for. I don't really like tempura, and I completely realize that that is just me. I don't know, like, I don't like tempura, maybe because I've just, in the past, I've had a lot of experiences with tempura where it's like, there's more batter than the actual thing that has been battered, and at that point it's just like, am I eating batter or am I eating some food? Like, which one is it? And also, sometimes the things that get battered in tempura aren't necessarily that great. A lot of the times it's like the sauce that's actually the thing that delivers the flavor more so than the actual tempura itself. Like, people I think who eat tempura with just salt are absolute like psychos. But I mean, look, I used to like a lot of tempura. Maybe it's because I ate a lot of tempura growing up, but like nowadays I'm kind of just like whatever with tempura. So I'm sorry, tempura lovers. I'm actually gonna throw this into the D tier. I think it's a little bit overrated in my opinion. And again, it's just like, I don't know, it's the sauce that does all the work. If you love tempura that much, just batter your own shit and then just buy the sauce. All right, next up is udon. Now, this is a different type of noodle. This is actually the last, or second to last noodle that we have here. This is a little bit more of a thicker noodle. Now, I'm probably going to also throw it into the C tier, kind of like ramen, where like, there's a lot of debate of like, oh, is ramen better than udon, XYZ? Honestly, it really depends on your mood. Like for me, udon, for one, is much better in the winter than ramen is. There are more varieties of udon, I think, that work better in the winter than ramen. Also, udon, for the most part, tends to be a lot less oily than ramen. Ramen, I think the one thing that sets ramen back for a lot of people is just how oily it is. If you don't like the oily type of stuff, but you still want some, like, good, thick noodles with a nice fucking broth attached to it, then, I would recommend udon. All right, next up is yakiniku, which literally translates to cooked meats. Now, there are probably a lot of, especially Americans, looking at this and going, what's the difference between this and K-barbecue? The difference is that K-barbecue is Korean and yakiniku is Japanese, if you couldn't get that. And also, I feel for the most part, a lot of K-barbecue uses different cuts of meats and different marinations of meats than yakiniku. There's only a couple, I feel, of slices of meat that you can get at a standard yakiniku that is actually marinated. A lot of the times, it uses just like straight cuts of meat, like the aforementioned gyutan, or the ox tongue, is a very typical meat that appears in yakiniku. But there's also, things like bulgogi as well, which is more of a Korean cut of meat that is marinated, that is also used a lot in yakiniku. But I really, really like yakiniku. If you can find like a good yakiniku place that's like not too expensive, but also not too cheap, like kind of in the mid to like semi-high to mid range, I think those are the best ones. You honestly don't have to like pay more than like, I don't know, $80 to $100 a person for yakiniku. If you're paying any more than that, you're probably getting ripped off, to be honest. But for the most part, I really enjoy yakiniku. I'm going to throw it up probably in a B tier. All right, next up we have, or second to last, is yakisoba, or fried soy noodles. Now, for those of you who have been on this channel, you would know that I ate 4,000 plus calories worth of yakisoba. For those of you who haven't checked that out, click the card up there, or the link is in the description. But I, for one, fucking love yakisoba. Yes, even after eating 4,000 calories of that shit, every time I'm at a summer festival or something and they're cooking some yakisoba, I'm going to that stall, dog. But yeah, yakisoba is freaking delicious. It is, in my opinion, some of the best street food that Japan has to offer. I'm throwing it up in an S tier. I don't care what anyone says. Yakisoba is fucking bomb. And last but certainly not least, we have yakitori. Again, a staple of Japanese street food. You might be looking at this and going, well, what's the difference between this and the kushiage? Well, this one, yakitori, for the most part, a lot of it is not deep fried. It is just like cooked meats and vegetables on some skewers. Now, there are a lot of izakayas in Japan that actually specialize in yakitori. Those kinds of places usually have some bomb-ass meat on stick for a really, really low price. I've seen some places that give it like one stick for like 80 yen, and they're really, really good even at that price. Like 80 yen is like 60 cents US, right? Like it's absolutely nothing for some fine ass meat. I think, just taking all that into consideration with the experience of a lot of yakitori places, I'm gonna throw it up in the A tier. I will never say no to some yakitori. It's affordable, it's delicious, it is absolutely divine. So yeah, I guess that's it for this particular tier list. Obviously, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there are way more types of Japanese food. Obviously, I skipped over some of the more obvious ones like sushi. Name me some of the ones that I missed out on in the comments, and I'll probably give you my thoughts on it in potentially another video. But that's just like some of the Japanese foods. Look, bottom line, there are some Japanese foods that are absolutely divine. There are some Japanese foods that are kind of overrated and overhyped and not worth your time, especially if you're visiting Japan for a limited amount of time. So yeah, either way, if it's your first time in Japan, dude, you don't even, you take this tier list with a grain of salt. It might be completely different in your tier list. Hell, if you visited Japan a number of times, this tier list might look completely different to you. So let me know your thoughts and opinions about it down in the comments below, as always. And yeah, if there are any other like tier lists or video ideas you want me to do on this channel, make sure to leave them down in the comments below. But either way, thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to smack my face right there to subscribe to the channel. Let's keep making big channel number go bigger. And over here next to my head is a couple more videos you can check out if you enjoyed this one. And as always, links to my social media, Twitter and Instagram, as well as my YouTube shorts and TikTok page, and my Patreon if you like to support future content and the stuff that I do is all down in the description below. But yeah, Japanese food is great. I'm gonna go eat some right now because I'm starving. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Peace!